Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I'm going to be talking about Unbelievable Episode 3. Full spoilers for the episode, of course. This episode is very much the end of Act 1 of the story. It ends with at least the declaration of like the cases being unified and a task force of some sort being formed, and feels kind of like, okay, we're going to get this bastard. This is kind of the end of Act 1. It really feels like this is the end of the setup. Because this episode largely revolves around, obviously we get introduced to Toni Collette's character Grace last episode at the end, and this episode revolves around Karen and Grace kind of sharing details, kind of realising quite quickly that they probably have the same suspect, and then sort of taking that further and realising there might be more, and traits the suspect might have because of how he's doing things. And we start early on, and we have Karen coming in to see her at her precinct and talking to her, and their dynamic is very interesting. Grace is very no nonsense, feels like she's not really paying attention to her a lot of the time, but she actually is taking the details in, and she comes across as a little bit rude, a little bit kind of hyper tense. And what's interesting is obviously Karen herself with her team has a dynamic. I didn't even mention it too much last episode about her kind of like having to really kind of get stern with some of the officers to do their jobs properly, about making statements properly, and not leaving early, finishing all the interviews with all the neighbours and things like that. And in this episode we see more of that, where she gets very pissy about, and I don't say that because I think she's unjust in doing this, but she gets very kind of agitated because one of the officers, when asked where the lab report is from the case, he says, "Oh, it's not here yet." And she's like, "Well, did you call and check why it's not here? Because it's been like nearly 2 days now." And he's like, "I'm sure it's on the way." And she rips him a new one. She rips him a new one because he didn't call and double check. Why is it not here? It's only supposed to take a day or so, and it's not been here yet. It's not here. And she gives this great speech about why this is important, about why they can't just waste time, about why they can't have this nonchalant attitude. And there is this kind of this feeling that some of them are like, "Oh, well, I'm annoyed that I can't go home and have dinner at the usual time because we have all this work to do," whereas Karen is taking everything very seriously. So it gives a nice bit of her character, because she really cares. We see it, when she goes home and she's still talking about the case with her husband, and all that stuff keeps there. But when she's around Grace, she feels more like the rookie, and it feels like Grace has already done things that she's having ideas for. There's a couple of times in this episode where she says, "Oh, I did this thing," and Grace is like, "Oh, I already did it." Although it's kind of a two-sided coin, because likewise, when Grace goes around all the pawn shops looking for anyone maybe turning the camera that they're looking for, Karen's like, "I kind of already did that. You could have asked. We could just be communicating better, and we wouldn't be wasting any time, because that was effectively a waste of time, in that sense." So, it clearly says they have to communicate, and early on, there's just sharing details. She's hearing about the case. Things are kind of matching up, and she's going to visit the victim of her case, of Gracie's case. And we meet this woman who's in her 50s, and she's there to talk to her because they have this new information that her ex-husband from decades ago was a convicted rapist, and she wants to ask her about this. This is maybe something that we should really be raising a red flag. And she brings this up, and the woman says that no, it definitely wasn't him. Like, I understand why you're saying this, but that's my ex-husband, while he is obviously dangerous and has a history, is my age, and this guy was young, he was strong, and also the height difference. My ex-husband was like 5'5", and this guy was 6 foot. Like, and it's not even close. There was no mistaking the height. So very interesting. Of course, she does tell Karen not to ask any questions, and Karen just can't help but ask something at the end when she asks about the birthmark. And the woman gets very kind of apologetic that she didn't really remember any visual details. And again, it's this idea that despite the fact that Grace is a lot more kind of in your face with everyone else, she's actually still very sympathetic to the victim. And when she kind of like tells off Karen afterwards for this, "I told you to stay quiet," she makes it very clear that this is my victim. I know what she's like, and she doesn't need any more questions from other badges. It's just like Karen, she's very, very aware of how she's treating the victim. And even though Karen has no ill intentions, we know she treats her victim well. this comes across to Karen as being this, extra person, this extra badge, this extra set of eyes, opening up this wound, which she came in and asked the question she needed to ask, and that's all she wanted. And of course, when she mentions that, because there's been things taken from each person, each victim, and she mentions her pink camera, you see Karen's eyes kind of light up and check her notes, and it's like, okay, that's like the piece of evidence that, it's not only that the MO is nearly identical, it's now there's a physical item that matches in each case, that it came from this victim and was used in Karen's case. So very, very good. And they're sharing details. Okay, there's enough similarities here to share their files, and they're both going over each other's files. And the other thing they get, of course, is security footage from local businesses near Karen's victim, and she spends a lot of time combing through this. She really cares about this. She's combing through all the vehicles going back and forth, and notices this white truck that's went back and forth multiple times in the hours before the attack. And she can tell it's got a broken rear view mirror, or side view mirror even, and maybe the make, but that's about it. She can't get the license plate. There's a really fun scene, actually, and I say fun because this is the sort of thing that a lot of cop shows will bullshit, and like, oh, we can enhance the image and get a license plate, or we can enhance the image and get even something more ridiculous, like in the reflection we could get this detail. And the technician's like, yeah, I'll take me a minute to render this and see if we can get a license plate. And when it comes up, it's like, nah, sorry, the resolution in this image is just too bad. We can't do it. This is impossible. And she's frustrated. She's like, oh, can we do something better? Can we use a better program? And he's like, no, there is nothing better. This is the best we have. This is the best we can do. So I don't think it was intentionally there to poke fun at other cop shows, but it felt that way to me, just because so many of them are guilty of that. But but she's very dedicated. We see her staying up all night looking through all this footage, writing down every vehicle that goes past, and then noticing this one that's going back and forth, and goes in and shows this to Grace. And Grace again is kind of like, okay, happy to see it, but is always kind of like moving and going to get coffee, and Karen's having to follow her, and we meet this other cop that works behind her, this system, this analyst who does a lot of the legwork in terms of data, and was looking for ex-prisoners or prisoners with this birthmark, and there's a whole thing, but it introduces this intern. So there's again a little bit of lighter material in here, where all this stuff where Grace keeps explaining things to the intern, but he's actually, his major or whatever actually lines him up to know a lot about what they're talking about in terms of the DNA. And the other cops like, oh, don't doubt my intern, and things like that. There's a little bit of levity in there, not like a super amount, but there's just a little bit to make these characters a little bit more human. And it definitely feels like the first episode was such this visceral attack on your senses about this horrible crime and this victim and what she's going through. And I feel like this episode especially, but a little bit in the last episode, it's kind of veering into feeling a little bit more like a normal show, a little bit more like a normal serialized cop show, where we're getting to know the cops more than the victims, and we still have that serious overtone of what's going on, but it's definitely got a bit more of other tones in there now, and it's a bit, dare I say, it's a bit of an easier watch because of that, because it's not just constantly this aggressive assault on your mood, essentially. So is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I mean, that is really debatable. I think so far it's handling it quite well, actually, and gives it an interesting kind of shift tonally. And I'm sure it can kind of slide back in, because obviously all the scenes with Marie, and we'll get to those at the end, do kind of go back to just the misery, as it were. But the scenes with Toni Collette and Merritt Weaver and their characters and them bouncing off each other, there is a chemistry that makes them just entertaining to watch, as opposed to just being like caught up in the severity of the case and the emotion of everything. Although they're clearly both driven, they both care about this. In fact, the first scene that I glossed over with Toni Collette is that she's questioning the guy she caught at the end of last episode. The guy who had the backpack on, he was dressed in black. And it turns out he's actually like a rock or a geologist of some kind. He was moving rocks because the building in the area that they've recently put up has disturbed the water flow in the city, or something like that. He was going on about it, but he was bringing up a lot of details, and it was very clear he knew what he was talking about, and this wasn't just some bullshit excuse. And realizing this and getting the alibi, because he was in a different city, and he was at a conference, and there was like hundreds of witnesses. Like his alibi is ironclad. There's no way it was him. She just sort of rips him a new one for having an attitude, because he's like annoyed and frustrated that he's been brought in, and it's like, hey, like, how about you actually help us and want the person to be caught and not have this attitude? What if this was someone you cared about who was attacked? Would you not want us? Would you not hope that anyone who was brought in for questioning so we could rule them out would be cooperative and be helpful and maybe help catch the person or find the person quicker as a result? And of course, it shuts him right up, and he leaves. And a lot of this show so far has been how kind of impersonal it's been for certain people, many of which of course are the men, and how our lead characters do actually really care and see the severity in what's going on. And I think and obviously both these characters are women anyway, but I think for me there was a moment in here where Karen was looking through the camera footage, and her daughter like can't sleep and comes in and then falls asleep on the couch, and she's kind of stroking her hair as she's doing this, and it adds this extra little layer to it. She's got a daughter, she's got a daughter who's going to grow up in this world, and there's just a little layer just to give it this extra bit of bite to her motivation. Not that there's not enough anyway, but it gives it this even more personal thing. I think anyone with kids, like, there's this extra. Anything awful in the world, I think you care just a little bit more because you have people you care about more than you've ever cared about anyone else growing up in the world. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. And so eventually she goes back in to see Grace, and they're talking about similarities in the case, things that they've noticed in both, blah blah blah. And she gets the idea. Karen gets this idea. What if whoever's doing this knows what the procedure is? Because there's a piece of DNA found from one of the victims' faces, and it turns out there's actually another small amount from another victim, the first victim, not Marie, the first, Gracie's victim. But anyway, so they're talking about this, and it's like, this guy is so DNA conscious, he's really aware of what he's leaving behind and how to clean it. The fact that, because we learn in this episode, not only does he make the victims take a shower, he sets a timer and says, you can't come out of that shower until this dings. Like, he makes them stay in there for 20 minutes so they're well and thoroughly, rinsed, as it were. And it's like, well, I mean, either he's a really smart criminal, and I think we both know there's not a lot of those, that's not super likely, and they go outside so they're not in the building to be heard, and it's the possibility that whoever's doing this is a police officer. And it's this scary thought that is going to be difficult to navigate, because it's like, because Karen's like, let's go to EIA and see if, like, or tell them what we've got and see if there's any flags. And she's like, and Grace is like, yeah, but if we do that, like, they may help us and they might not, but either way, within 10 minutes, all of the cops around us are going to know we're looking for a cop. And that takes away a lot of our support, because they feel targeted, they feel suspicious, whatever. And it really paints this idea. And we get to meet Gracie's husband briefly, and he, his job, he's not a cop, but he works at the courts. I can't remember the exact title of his job was, but or the district attorney or something like that. He's not a district attorney, but he works like in that kind of level. But like, and like, it's this kind of brick wall. They kind of this fear they hit, and of course, Karen gets the idea. She gets the idea that, like, so this idea that when she's talking to her husband and realizes that the only reason they found out that these two cases were linked and they had the same person is because she happened to be married to someone who worked at this other precinct and knew enough about their case that she could connect it and then go and see see Grace, see the other detective. Otherwise, she would never have found out about this. She would never have made this connection. And it gives her the idea that, what if this is something else the perpetrator knows? Is he knows that precincts in different towns don't really talk to each other. There is a system that information is put into it, and we get like a bit more detail on that, where it's never that thorough. Like, where, yeah, reports are written up. Usually you have to, and we've seen it from Karen's story, that she's had to really kind of like bite our officers in the ass to make sure they write proper reports. But even when they write proper reports, the tab on the system to put in all the extra details, all the, like they'll put in, there was this type of crime, the suspects, this race and height and whatever, but it's very, very just the basics, and the actual like sort of report, the details of how the crime was perpetrated, all the little like sort of things that would link it to other crimes, all that stuff is usually left blank. I think Grace says that it's like 50-50 on a murder if they bother putting that in. But for for a sexual assault, it's basically never. And she does another late night of research and comes in and explains her theory that what if he knows this? What if he knows we won't talk to each other? Again, this could be that he's a police officer, or it could be that he knows the inner workings. Maybe he's got another role that's close to it, but he knows that these places don't talk to each other. So as long as he keeps moving, as long as he never commits more than one crime in the one precinct's like sort of town or area, he knows he's likely to never be caught because the police will never connect the different cases. And I think, as Grace puts it, there could be 8 different victims, and as long as they're all in different towns, those 8 different detectives looking into all these cases will never know they're looking for the same person. And it's just by luck that these two were able to find each other. So of course she's like, okay, I've got like the last 5 years, every crime, every sexual assault in the last 5 years, and they're basically going to, the rest of the episode, they're calling every detective associated with every single one of these cases to ask about the details. And we see them like they're still phoning people at dinner, they're phoning people walking their dog, they're phoning people. It's legwork. It's lots and lots and lots of legwork. And I'll just briefly mention as well, the DNA they find isn't enough for the good match. Like there's a second sort of like thing they can do that'll narrow it down to a family line, but they can't get like an exact match with it. I'll just mention that detail just in case because it may be important later. But it's the next day where it's actually Grace. This is the end of the episode. Grace comes to see Karen and is like, "No, I got a match," and explains, "No, broke in, blindfolded, made shower afterwards, threatened with a gun, threatened to show the photo that he took if she spoke out, and the MO was the same." And she's like, "No, we're officially merging these cases. We're going to bring in the FBI and we're going to catch this, mother effer." And it's kind of this kind of gun-ho moment at the end of like, no, we're going to do this. Like all of a sudden, this is like a statewide crime wave that we have to deal with, and it really sets this up. And it also, again, it reaffirms the idea that he's definitely looking for a new victim. He's definitely planning to do this again. So it sets this clock. It sets this clock to catch him. So all this stuff was super engaging. All this stuff was doing this neat job of propelling the case in a way that makes sense. Because I think one of the things that I would critique, because I've heard someone compare this to True Detective, and I think the one thing that I always critiqued in True Detective, and I'm including season 1 in this, I want to make this clear. True Detective season 1 was a good season of TV, but it was not without faults. It was good because of the performances and because of the good direction. The actual script was not that good, and the case itself was very convoluted and not that easy to follow. It was not easy to understand why A led to B and why B led to C. This show has done a very good job of always making you understand the thought process in the case, which I think is very important for something that is about a case like this, where it is progressing and we're supposed to understand the revelations and the eureka moments. You want to be there feeling eureka when the characters do. And this show so far has done a really good job of that, but it's also given the detectives the personal stake in it, where they really want to solve the case. They're passionate about the case. It's not just another job, and the relationship's kind of forming throughout. And I think there's this respect at the end of the episode, when Toni Collette, when Grace comes and brings her coffee in the morning, it's this acknowledgement of, okay, like, you know what, we got to this point because you did this work. Obviously she had to do a lot of, equal amount of the legwork afterwards, but this was your idea. We got to this point, you found me, like, I mean, I'm not going to say that she's definitely going to treat her completely equal next episode, but there's a respect there that has been earned, and that is just really neat. So, no, the episode progresses. I want to briefly mention, actually, I glossed over a scene where Karen went to see Amber, her victim, and her boyfriend was there, and very awkward scene, and she's asking, like, have you got a suspect? Do you know who he is? Have you caught him yet? And she has to kind of, like, really, like, swallow her, not her pride, but, like, just really, like, unfortunately say no to these questions. She doesn't have anything really to tell her. And the boyfriend comes out with like, I heard, I read that, if you don't catch him in the first 7 days, the chances of catching him significantly like goes down. And Karen honestly says, yeah, statistically that's technically true, but that doesn't mean. And he kind of like cuts her off and makes it very clear that he's a mathematician and he believes in the numbers and he's very concerned. And he says, "Why are you here with us if you've only got 5 days left to catch him before the likelihood of catching him completely diminishes?" And obviously he's coming off as very, very confrontational here. I don't think it never really crosses a line, though. I don't think. I think it's understandable why he feels the way he does. Obviously, we know that Karen cares, and we know Karen's doing everything she can. She's going above and beyond the college. We see the other cops who are just kind of doing their job and just want to go home and clock out. We see how devoted Karen is, but you get why he feels this way, and I don't think he crosses a line where you feel like, oh, he's being a complete dickhead. And I think Karen, much like being sympathetic to Amber herself, I think Karen knows why he feels this way. She knows why he is somewhat within a certain level of obviously acceptability, kind of aggressive here. She knows why he feels this way. So, but it was a interesting, well done little scene. Obviously, the direction is still pretty solid. I don't have any as particular standout moments with the direction in this episode as much, but because it was a lot more sort of typical, sort of like just investigating the case kind of thing for the most part. But really solid performances from both leads, really good, and I'm really excited about the case kind of breaking up and them. And it's funny at this point, like with Marie, because her case was declared as solved or closed, rather. Like, how long will it take to get to her? And I almost think it might not be until like episode 7 or 8. Like, I could see it being right towards the end of the season before we finally see Marie. I think I said Grace there. I think I said the wrong name. This is the problem when I do one of these on my own. No, like, unless I happen to catch it and think I said the wrong name there, I never actually notice I said the wrong thing. I do that sometimes. But yeah, Marie, like, I don't think we'll see Marie until towards the end of the season. I don't think we'll see what she looks like in 2011 until our two leads like find her and have a reason to sort of look into the case. Obviously, I'm looking forward to that. And to its credit, this episode did give me a title card saying 2008 when it cut back. I wish it had done that in the last episode as well, just to make it clear that it was going to be cutting back and forth. I don't need it every episode even. It was just, the last episode was a little bit confusing because it jumped ahead, and then when it went back to Marie, I don't think it gave me if it did, I missed it, but I noticed it here that it only did it once. It did it because the scene opened in 2011, the episode opened in 2011, and then when it cut to Marie for the first time, it came up saying 2008. I wish it had done that in the last episode just to make it clear it was cutting back and forth. Now that I know it's cutting back and forth, it's not a big deal. I mean, I know, it's easy. But it's still a little thing. So yeah, Marie stuff. Somehow the press get a hold of her name. And Judith, her foster mother, her recent foster mother, is talking to Colleen, the other foster mother, on the phone, and she's like trying to like get her at work before she finds out. And of course, she takes one look at her phone when she gets off her shift, and like people are texting her horrible messages, saying she's a liar and she's awful and she's a evil human being and so on. And it's kind of heartbreaking. She eventually leaves the car and rides off, and the press see her go in, but like she goes in and locks her door, and it's just this devastating kind of thing. And she's crying a lot this episode. She doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to answer the door, but it's actually her ex-boyfriend who shows up and takes her to the beach, and wants to let her know that he believed her, and she never actually outright says that like it was true and that the lie is actually that didn't happen. She kind of alludes to it though. She kind of like talks about how in her life she's felt a lot of pressure from adults to go along with what they're saying and things like that, and then she tried to fight back as a kid, but she talks about this horrible foster father who would hit her when she tried to be awful to him. She thought, oh, if I got aggressive and act like an asshole, they'll just leave me alone. And it never worked. It never worked because they were bigger and they were stronger, and they would lash out and make sure they were in charge or heard or whatever. And it's this kind of sweet scene because he makes her, he cheers her up. he actually kind of like gets her to look forward to the future, where this will blow over a little bit and people won't remember as much, and you'll have your driver's license and you'll be able to go where you want. Maybe you've saved some money and you've got a car. It gives her this hope for the future, something that she's not even thought about, or at least as far as we can tell, even felt that way since everything happened. And she even says as much when he drives her back, because he lets her drive to practice. And then it's this great scene where she's sort of letting off some steam and like screaming out the window, and it's kind of heartwarming. And when they get back, she's like, "Oh, do you ever miss that we were dating?" And he says, "Well, yeah." And we find out the reason why they're not together anymore is because he's very religious and she's not. And and she says, "Oh, maybe we could get married one day and it won't be a sin." And he's like, "Well, you'd have to join the church." He's very religious, and she's like, "Maybe I could." And he's like, "You should come with me." And she's like, "Okay." And he's like, "Really?" And it's it's kind of this sweet moment where it feels like whether or not she is ready, and maybe that's what she needs in her life. Maybe something like the idea of a religion is something that she could use in her life right now. But either way, this is like this beacon of hope in this episode for her, where despite how everything else is, she might have some sort of hope for the future, some sort of direction her life might start to be able to take. If she takes this decision now to be a part of his world and go down that path, because he clearly makes her happy and is clearly very good to her. So you feel the happiness for her, and she maybe it won't work out, maybe she won't like it, maybe she won't gel with the idea of going to church, but she seems to really want to try and see if it's a thing that she can be a part of. But when she gets in, there's a letter waiting for her, and it's a criminal citation for filling a false police report. And she gets really upset because she's not allowed to have a criminal record. That was one of the conditions of living here. And the irony of this, if you can even call it that, is that the awful cop from the first episode, the way he scared her out of taking a lie detector test was that if she takes it and fails, then she'll have to be charged. And that was kind of what forced her hand into just sort of maintaining the story that it was a lie, that she was never attacked. And here it's happening anyway. The thing he threatened is happening anyway, despite the fact that she went along with what he said. And it adds this extra layer of anger to the whole thing. Because if it was going to happen anyway, because at this point she technically failed a false report in the first place. If we're going along with the idea that she lied in the first place, then she already failed a false report. And I don't know if it's because her name's leaked, so they have to like follow through to make an example of her. What they're going to say, but like she starts breaking down, and you feel for her because she went along with this story to avoid this, and it's happening anyway. So she has nothing. She has like no outcome from this. Because the one positive thing that was coming out of this is that she was going to get to stay where she was, or I mean, obviously, we assumed she'd passed the lie detector test and she'd get that anyway. But that was the one silver lining for her. That was the one thing that she was holding on to, is that she got to remain where she was living and get to keep that part of her life. And it may be threatened anyway. So yeah, and. Yeah, I don't fancy the next part of this story. It's definitely going to be probably the depressing part of episode 4. I'm going to imagine, but really solid episode. The case is very engaging right now, which is good because I mean the story's revolving around it, and the two leads who are working on it are also very likable and have enough humanity, enough just a little bit of levity here or there, just to make them feel like real people. And make them worthwhile characters to keep watching. So that is episode 3 of Unbelievable. So you can let me know what you thought of episode 3 in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. You can get me specifically on Twitter for my own ramblings at Wibble89. You can support everything we do. You can rate the audio podcast version on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. A nice 5-star rating goes a long way to the service like recommending us out and things like that. You can, of course, also support us financially over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month. and you get some bonuses for that. And then at the higher tiers, you get early access and voting rights on some of the movie podcasts, and your name at the end of the video. Just go have a look. But every dollar is helpful, so $1 per month is fantastic. So if you want to go over and have a look and support everything we do, you can go do that. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Check out other shows that are coming. We got another Netflix show starting this coming Friday called Criminal that me and Connor will check out. And the week after that, we have The Politician. The week after that, we have Raising Dion. So a lot of Netflix content to try in the next few weeks, and we'll see which ones stick. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?